Hello, my name is Sergio Mendoza, and today I'm going to be going over my Latin American Studies final project. This semester I have learned a lot about Latin America. We have covered many topics concerning the country. For the most part, it has been about the big countries and the dictatorships that have oppressed their people. We also covered identity and its role in Latin America. One term that was covered is self-fashioning. Another term we covered is revolution, which occurred frequently in Mexico as people overthrew the government. I'll be going over the immigration process and how the country received immigrants. Lastly, I will be going over transnationalism, which is when immigrants do not accept all culture of the migrating country. A lot of the information covered suggests that Latin America has many political problems across its countries. Some people are more privileged than others. There have been major class differences that have been enforced with military power, racism, and discrimination. The five main topics I will cover are self-fashioning, military dictatorship, revolution, the immigration process, and transnationalism. Self-fashioning is an important theme with identity and hierarchy that shapes the political and atmosphere in Latin America. There was a big slave culture. The definition of self-fashioning is describe the process of constructing one's identity and public persona according to a set of socially acceptable standards. This was a point that was brought up in Module 4. Self-fashioning is the identity we must adopt to uphold our responsibility in society. In the role of justice, it depicts a lieutenant and how he gained validation from his military title, but that validation meant nothing once he was left alone. Military dictatorship was a common situation in Latin America. It was displayed in film Machuca in Module 7. This shows how abusive government in South America were dominating certain countries. They imposed their rules to make sure the country would basically fall in line. They made sure there was no communism, and they would use force to kick out the poor from schools. They would overpower the church if the people were not happy with the way things were being ran. Specifically, people with more money had a stronger say in political affairs. Revolution. Revolution is a common theme in Mexico, especially in the fight for political power. It was a constant power struggle between the rulers. It felt as if they all had their own problems that could not be resolved. Mexico's system of government underwent many reforms compared to the United States of America. For example, Porfirio Diaz was attacked by Francisco I. Madero, which led a rebellion to overthrow the government. The migration process in the United States has been difficult for certain ethnic groups. For example, Latin Americans have been discriminated against. On June 9th, 1954, the INS Commissioner General Joseph Swing started Operation Wetback. It's basically when they discriminated against Mexicans in the United States, specifically anyone who looked Mexican could be deported. And I'm going to quote from Immigration's Complexities, Assimilation's Discontent by Ruben G. Rambau. Contemporary nativism in the current political climate rails against immigration without caring to understand the history and complexity of the flows, the forces that propel it, the networks that sustain it, or the demographic dynamics that will shape the American and global futures. And then I would like to go over two of the reforms. Arizona SB 1070, which requires police to determine the immigration status of someone arrested or detained when there is reasonable suspicion they are not in the U.S. legally. Now I'll go over the California DREAM Act that provides access to state financial aid for AB 540 students. The Trust Act that keeps jails from communicating with ICE to avoid high numbers of deportations. So as you can see, one of them is discriminatory against immigrants and one helps immigrants with education. So sometimes laws are in favor of immigration and sometimes they're not. Now I'm going to go over transnationalism. Transnationalism is when immigrants have loyalty to both their old country and their new country. They still maintain a relationship with their home by giving them money they earn from the United States. Some immigrants end up returning to their country of origin. They hold on to certain values from their country so they do not fully assimilate into the United States. Certain groups develop distinct identities and then return to their countries of origin with different cultures. This created unions in the United States. For example, Grupo Unión, which would send money back to Mexico to create projects for their town. Another term for this is remittances. Individuals and groups send money or resources back to their country of origin. To go more on remittances, in Mexico it exceeds 20 billion a year, according to the Mexican Connection. A lot of immigrants leave their towns to go to another country, such as the United States, specifically Mexico. There are a lot of pueblos that basically the men leave to get money to bring back to their pueblo to fund certain projects such as stadiums, emergency services, etc. Mexico is one of the highest countries, the highest that returns money back to their country, as you can see in the chart. To conclude, I covered self-fashioning, military dictatorship, revolution, migration process, and transnationalism. Self-fashioning concerns identity among Latin Americans as they fit into the roles of society and the country. Military dictatorship is when the military dominates the country. A revolution is when the government is overthrown by other groups to take power. And migration process describes how immigrants are received by foreign countries. And transnationalism, which describes how immigrants form unions. And remittances, to send money back to their country of origin, as well as keeping some of their values and culture instead of fully assimilating to the country they are migrating to. Overall, I've learned a lot of things about Latin America that I have not known before. Latin America is very diverse. It has a lot of fascinating history and unique lands that I would still enjoy to visit. I still aspire to visit, and I want to continue learning about the culture, different indigenous populations, as well as learning Spanish as well as Portuguese to have a better understanding.